Louis Frederick Fieser created napalm in 1942 when working at Harvard University for the National Defense Research Committee. Napalm is a gelic incendiary that sticks to skin and burns at 1,200 degrees Celsius. It was used in World War II and the Cold War. After it was created, it was one of the most controversial weapons used because of its horrifying effects. Even though napalm was created on Valentine's Day 1942, it has a long history in warfare. Napalm was used 2,000 years ago under the pseudonym Greek Fire. Louis Frederick Fieser, the creator of napalm, took great inspiration from the Roman weapon and practically recreated the device. But this time, it would be mass-produced, kill an estimated 100,000 people, burn 15 square miles. But the horror doesn't stop there.
The first recorded strategic use of napalm incendiary bombs occurred in an attack by the U.S. Army Air Force on Berlin, March 6, 1944. Further use of napalm by American forces occurred in the Pacific Theater of Operations, where in 1944 and 1945, napalm was used as a tactical weapon against Japanese bunkers, pillboxes, tunnels, and other fortifications, especially on Saipan, Iwo Jima, the Philippines, and Okinawa, where deeply dug in Japanese troops refused to surrender. Napalm bombs were dropped by aviators of the U.S. Navy, the United States Army Air Forces, and the U.S. Napalm and Agent Orange was used by U.S. troops in Vietnam. Napalm became a symbol of U.S. destructive power in the war because of its horrifying effects. In 1980, the United Nations banned the use of napalm, but international law doesn't prohibit the use of incendiary weapons against military targets. It seems desirable, the creator of napalm, Louis Frederick Fieser, wrote, to try to promote an international agreement to outlaw further use of napalm. In 1984, Dow and other chemical companies settled a class action lawsuit out of court by agreeing to establish a $180 million fund for the use of veterans and families of veterans exposed to Agent Orange and napalm. 30 years after the ban on napalm, in the 1980s, on President Barack Obama's first day, it was ratified. Its ratification, however, is subject to a reservation that says that the treaty can be ignored if it would save civilian lives.
Many people started protesting Dow Chemicals for the mass production of napalm. The first anti-war protest against Dow occurred in October 1966 and spread nationally to hundreds of universities. Anti-war activists made napalm a symbol of the Vietnam War because it was called into question the morality of military tactics being used at the time. And disillusionment was beginning to reach greater sections of tax-paying public. More casualties were reported in Vietnam every day, even as U.S. commanders demanded more troops. Under the draft system, as many as 40,000 young men were called into service each month, adding fuel to the fire of the anti-war movement. When we were developing napalm, we never thought of any anti-personnel use. We were thinking in terms of wooden structures or factories, said Louis Frederick Fieser, the creator of napalm. In conclusion, napalm was a misused weapon that killed 100,000 people, burned 15 square miles. 40,000 people died of napalm in 4 years during World War II. 17,000 of those people were civilians. That means 192 people died every single week for 200 weeks straight because of napalm.
The movement against U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War began with peace activists and leftist intellectuals on college campuses in 1965. By November 1967, American troop strength in Vietnam was approaching 500,000, and U.S. casualties had reached 15,058 killed and 109,527 wounded. The Vietnam War was costing the U.S. some $25 billion per year, and disillusionment was beginning to reach greater sections of the tax-paying public. More casualties were reported in Vietnam every day, even as U.S. commanders demanding more troops. Under the draft system, as many as 40,000 young men were called into service each month, adding fuel to the fire of the anti-war movement.